What goes into baseball's newest projection system and how's it doing in its rookie season? I've got the creator of Oopsy, Jordan Rosenblum, on the line to answer those questions here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, tervetuloa. That was my attempt
Oh,
to
wow.
welcome you to the podcast in Finnish because we have everyone's favorite Finland-based fantasy baseball projection creator, possibly the only Finland-based fantasy baseball projection creator. But Jordan, how did I do, and how are you doing?
I'm doing well. That was very, very good. Very impressed with your finish. It's coming along nicely. You'll overtake me pretty soon.
Nice. How is Suomi this time of year? Very sunny, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, today is or tomorrow's midsummer. I think last time we spoke was around a year ago, also around
Yeah,
midsummer. So it's the longest day, but not. We do get a little bit of darkness, maybe like an hour or something, because I'm in the capital
nice.
region. But
Hopefully, we bring no darkness to everybody's morning today because we are going to have some fun talking about your projection system, Oopsie, in its first season and some of the players that it's hit on and maybe some of the players that it's missed on. Not too many of those, though, because it's doing pretty well this year, I would say. We'll get to your thoughts on that in a moment. But as always, I do want to start with some of the biggest headlines. We've got positive news on Shane McClanahan yesterday with the Rays saying that he got good news from the nerve specialist. He should resume throwing off a mound soon. Now, Jordan, I was listening to your recent podcast appearance on the Lunch Angle a few weeks ago in preparation for this, and you mentioned that you're open to stashing pitchers for some time. Is Shane McClanahan somebody you'd be looking to stash right about now, or do you think he's still too far away and too risky for that to be worth it?
it depends. So in the Champions League, I'm pretty desperate for pitching, and there aren't that many stashes. They all got scooped up. I went for Max Meyer last week, but I got outbid. I'm like pretty poor and desperate in that league. So I would look at him there. Um, Pablo Lopez is another guy that it's a little too early to stash for me. And I looked at the RotoWire like ETAs, and they have McClanahan at August 1st, so a little bit ahead of Lopez probably. Um, but I don't know if that's too bullish or not, or what you feel about that. Um, but I think it's like pretty soon. If not this week, then maybe in the first week in July, I would definitely seriously consider it. I actually just this week. Well, I shouldn't necessarily reveal this, but maybe I'll start adding Tanner Houck in a few leagues because I think his timeline is very clear now. I think he'll like July 1st is around the ETA. Um, and I could use the depth. He's not a guy I would use all the time, but I could always use the pitching depth. I like to play the matchups.
So it sounds like what about 2 weeks for a lesser pitcher like Max Meyer or Tanner Houck, but you're willing to go up to nearly 6 weeks for somebody like a Shane McClanahan. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah. I think if I knew he'd be back August 1st, then I probably would already want to do it this weekend. But it seems like there's could be uncertainty and a lot of uncertainty in his timeline. He's had like different setbacks, but he does seem okay, like avoiding any additional surgeries or anything. Um, so it could be worth it. Although as the season progresses, then you want to spend less time stashing since there's less time to even compete anymore.
True, true. If the payoff's only going to be a month at the end of the year,
Yeah.
that's not actually going to move the needle all that much. That could be roughly what we're looking at for Cole Reagans. He had a second opinion on Tuesday, confirmed that he has a rotator cuff strain in his left shoulder. It's been about 2 weeks since he's last thrown, and he's going to be shut down for another 2 weeks before being reevaluated. And at that point, if he's cleared to start throwing then, we're still probably a month to 6 weeks out. So I'd imagine the question here is more, is he the guy you cut to stash someone like Shane McClanahan?
Yeah, I think it seems like Reagan's timeline like it would be no better than like Pablo Lopez, who I'm kind of using as the threshold here since he's pretty widely available now. And I'm not quite ready to stash in those instances yet. But I think with Lopez, if we got a positive update this week or next week, then I easily could stash him pretty soon. Reagan's it seemed quite serious to me, and like it's hard to expect him back. Um, and then Roki Sasaki is a guy I don't know if you were going to bring him up, but he's a guy that I had big hopes for this year, and I just had to cut ties with him because there was some news that he might not come back at all this year, which could be true for Reagan as well. But then Dave Roberts was saying that actually Sasaki he's actually doing fine. He might come back start his rehab pretty soon. So it seems quite up in the air. But then there's the whole issue of like, is he functional right now? Like, can he get dudes out? That's a separate issue.
Right. Yeah, we still don't even know that. So that's one that I would be less interested in. Probably, I don't know. The tail end of the upside for Sasaki still presumably there. When I think about stashes myself, I'm often thinking, how good could it be? Because I know the downside is very low, and I guess that we could still say the upside is pretty high. While we're on the topic of stashes, Grayson Rodriguez was mentioned in the chat. He's eyeing a return after the All-Star break. He'd be another good one to stash around this time.
Grayson he already got scooped up a few weeks back in Champions League, and he's a guy I'd prioritize above all of these names. And Sazaki's a dude that he has a long track record before the MLB. He's a short track record of struggling, a long track record of success. So I basically want to see if he finally striking out guys in his rehab starts. I would easily roll the dice, but I would like to see some good rehab starts.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair to me. Speaking of Dodgers pitchers, we got one bit of non-injury related news. Well, I guess it's still injury related. Uh, Emmett Sheehan returned from Tommy John surgery, made his season debut yesterday against the Padres. He would have got the win if you're allowed to get the win while only pitching 4 innings, but that is part of the problem here. He threw the first 4 innings, allowed just 1 run on 3 hits, no walks, 6 strikeouts. Really strong 4 innings, but then Justin Robleski came in and got the win, pitching the last 5 innings for the Dodgers. Is Emmett Sheehan somebody that you'd be throwing some pretty sizable bids on this weekend? Or do you think, it's a Dodger starter? He's probably going to go 4 innings a lot and then hit the IL again in a few weeks to bring somebody else in, and it's just going to be a pain to manage. Which side of that would you be on?
I would definitely like some Sheehan. His oopsie is like really good compared to the other systems. I think it's like 360 rest of season versus like 394 for Steamer, but both of those are good with like a lot of strikeouts. And his bat projection is not bad either. Although the bat like assumes like a higher ERA for everybody, but yeah, I think Sheehan looks really good, and he looked really good in his rehab appearances. So he's like a low key under the radar guy I'd want to go pretty hard for. I just had an interesting choice in the dynasty league in Highlander. I play with James Anderson and other industry writers, and I had to choose between either going for Max Fried or Sheehan plus Luzardo. I chose Fried, but I was actually really tempted to go Sheehan plus Luzardo, and I still don't know if it was the right decision. What would you have
Yeah,
done there?
that's a tough one. This is a pretty deep league too, right? So filling 2 spots does have a lot of value because your last few pitchers are going to be pretty shaky, right?
Yeah, and I like two pitchers better than one, just given how often they break. That was a big consideration. But Fried is obviously like in the short term, he's like you have to worry about Sheehan's role and stuff, and Fried is been really good in the short term.
Yeah, I think I'd probably not pass up on the chance to get somebody who's been as good as Freed has been, but man, that is really close. So I could see arguments for both sides there.
Yeah.
You mentioned your projection system, Oopsie, being much higher on Emmett Sheehan than some of the others out there, which is a good transition. Let's talk about what exactly is your projection system, Oopsie. There were plenty of projection systems in the world already. So, what motivated you to say, you know what, we actually need one more and I can add some value here? What is it that Oopsie does different than a lot of the other projection systems?
Well, I mean, there are a good number of projection systems, but we're still only talking like, well, there's like 4 or 5 on Fangraphs. And I basically had for years been producing these peak projections for prospects because people hadn't really been doing that. So I was kind of filling the gap there, and trying to reconcile the difference between like how fantasy owners value their prospects, and how projection systems do, because oftentimes they're very sought after in fantasy leagues, but projections don't really like them. So trying to test out why that is, and maybe come up with projections that are more consistent with how prospects are actually valued, not just in fantasy but also in real life. So I had a lot of the just by nature of doing that, I had a lot of the ingredients that go into a projection system, like translations and park factors and aging effects. So that already got me like 70% of the way there. Um, and then there's always new metrics coming out each year in baseball. We got the Stuff Plus metrics, then we got the bat speed metrics for hitters, and I was one of the first ones that kind of incorporated them into the traditional projection system. So following the logic of like a more established system like Marcel or any of the or Steamer or any of the projection systems, and then throwing some additional stuff in there to see if it could improve things a little bit at the margins. I mean, uh, when you're talking about projections, the improvements are always going to be marginal. It's hard to, once you're doing the obvious stuff like capturing the last couple of years of performance and capturing aging and translations, and aging doesn't even help necessarily that much. Uh, Once you're doing all the low hanging fruit, then it really becomes a fight over like marginal benefits, marginal advantages over like Steamer or the Batch, or if they are better than me, then that's marginal advantage also. We're all fighting over like 1% of, I mean, like a forecast error, 1% of forecast error.
So, yeah, what's it been like seeing your projection system, your baby, out in the world, in the public eye for the first time this year? Is it nerve-wracking, exciting? What's the experience been like?
I feel like I'm too plugged into my it probably is a good thing. I'm very plugged into the performance of my um NFBC teams. So I'm
Hmm.
mostly just focused on that. I'm focused on the weekly projections, making good fab decisions. Um and I don't have like the overall how Oopsy's doing it. It's very convenient for me because now I can throw it in the Fangraphs auction calculator. I can refer to it in my fab and everything. So in that way, it's been really nice. But I've really been focused very short term on kind of maximize, trying to make my squads the best they can be, especially in the main event leagues and the Champions League.
And is it working? Are you particularly happy? Is there anything that Oopsie is doing well that you've already noticed through what 2.5 months of its life on your NFBC teams in particular?
um, well, I think with NFBC, the projections tend to move uh, together. So usually, if the bat thinks someone's a good play, or Steamer does, or someone's a good ad, or should be dropped, they tend to all agree. There are extreme examples, obviously, but they tend to they tend to all agree. But at the same time, I've been monitoring how it's doing like each month or so, and it seems to be pretty competitive with Steamer and the BATX, which are the systems I kind of use as a baseline because they're the systems I respect the most in terms of forecast accuracy. So I'm happy with that. I think Joe Adell is an interesting case. He's one of the oopsie hitters that has uh, that Oopsie is higher on Adele than the other systems, and I can become skeptical sometimes because I do think bat speed helps with every it helps with generally improving the accuracy. But then you look at guys like John Kenzie Noel, and he absolutely does nothing the whole season, gets sent down like a mercy killing. He's doing okay in AAA now, but it's hard to like it's frustrating. Of course, every system's going to have guys that miss, but you look at John Kenzie and he's doing just absolutely nothing. He's swinging really hard, but besides that, he's doing nothing. But then Joe Adell, I had the same sort of logic, so I'm kind of deciding whether to cut him or Jordan Walker in the Champions League a few weeks back. Um, this was when Walker was still healthy, like before this latest injury, uh, and I decided to cut Adele because like I kind of was averaging Steamer and the Bad X and me, and this was when Adele's playing time was sort of shaky. Kyron Paris was still there. They weren't comfortable using Adele at center field in that time. But then Trout came back. They started using Adele in center field exclusively, and the rest is sort of history. He's gone off. I still have him in 2 out of 5 like higher stakes leagues, but I cut him in the Champions League. And it's really frustrating. I wish I had more faith in Oopsie in that case. And then in the case of John Kenzie, who I only would have in deeper leagues anyway, because he's like a guy who doesn't get that as much playing time. But I wish I maybe would have had less faith in John Kenzie.
All those guys are pretty big bat speed outliers, Jordan Walker included there, right?
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious, in terms of things you might be thinking about improving for next year, would it be more a way of trying to figure out how some of these outliers aren't quite as good as Oopsie thinks they are, or would it be more, including yet more new StatCast stats? We just had the bat tracking stuff come out in season already. We got info on where exactly people's feet are placed in the box. I can't imagine that that's all that useful to your projection system, but point is we've got new data all the time. Are you thinking more about including yet more stuff, or are you thinking more about refining some of the stuff you're already doing?
Yeah, I think I have a long list of stuff that I want to test and I could add, but nothing is like must add. I think it meets like minimum levels of quality now. I think, um, but yeah, I definitely wonder how I might like penalize a guy like Noel for the bats or like not weigh his bat speed as much, um, but while still giving a lot of weight to bat speed overall. Because I think my weighting of bat speed uh, is, if anything, is conservative in year one, and I feel confident about that overall. And if you look at guys like Stephen Kwan or Isaac Paredes, and you look at me versus the Bad X, I'm usually in the middle, like kind of oopsie the moderate. Whereas the Bad X tends to penalize them very harshly. These lower bat speed, or like these bad stat casts, quality of contact guys. Um, Quan is a good example. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with being in the middle there because I think while the Bad X is really good in terms of overall accuracy, it does seem to be like quite harsh compared to other systems on the really low bat speed outliers or the low statcast outliers, since it doesn't capture bat speed yet. But like Quan, and I would have to double check Jacob Wilson, but I would guess that they're it's pretty low on him also. Jeff McNeil in the past, although we don't care about Jeff McNeil so much anymore as fantasy baseballers.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, let's take a look at Jacob Wilson. You heading into the season were higher than the Bad X, but lower than Zips and Steamer, and right now that seems to be still true. So I guess that lines up with what you were saying there.
Nice, yeah. And Luis Ariz is another one I think that I like. I like seeing Oopsie in the middle on those dudes.
All right. Well, we are going to take a look at some of the specific players who Oopsie was an outlier on, for better or worse, and we're going to focus on both the areas where Oopsie was correct and the areas where Oopsie was incorrect. Here, I've got some nice colored tables for people to follow along with us live. So what we're doing here is I have pulled out players where Oopsie was an outlier by at least 5%. We're starting with WRC plus for hitters, even though that's not a fantasy stat, it's just a good mark on how generally good these projection systems think a hitter is. So we've got a handful of hitters here who have come to the plate at least 100 times, and Oopsie was at least 5% higher on them than both the Bat X and Steamer, as well as ATC, that sort of meta projection system, or whatever you want to call it. The reason I'm doing it this way, and you can tell me whether or not you think this is good methodology or not, is I am a little bit less concerned with, as this is as a user of projection systems, not as a creator of them. I'm a little bit less concerned with exactly how accurate they are. I'm more concerned with, is Oopsie going to put me on this guy, right? So if I'm using Oopsie at the table and the guy next to me is using the Bad X and the guy on the other side is using Steamer and the guy across from me is using ATC, well, am I going to like this guy the most of all of them? And am I going to actually draft them? And we're going to see a handful of players here who Oopsie would have told you to draft correctly or told you to avoid correctly. What do you think about that as an approach to the rest of the podcast? I hope you're at least somewhat positive about it, because it's too late to change.
Oh yeah, I would have said something to you earlier if I was not positive about it. I think this is reasonable. I think it's similar to what I would do. I might. So when I test the errors, I may sort them by like the size of the error instead, and then look for the biggest errors relative to other systems. But it's the same logic, and this is definitely a reasonable way of doing it. And when I look at these tables, I'm like, uh, well, as the creator, I'm looking for like possible patterns in the dudes that might hint at like a variable that I excluded. So for John Kenzie, I'm talking a lot about him, but and other guys like that who are good at bat speed but don't seem to be performing. Um, One thing that I could test is like sweet spot, like sort of the launch angle as a variable. It doesn't have the same sort of stickiness as bat speed, which is a really nice benefit of bat speed. But it is something I think the bat X includes it because I looked at my system versus the bat X, and then I correlated it, like the differences with different statcast variables to see if it included anything that I wasn't including. And the two variables that stood out were sweet spot and sprint speed. It seemed like I was waiting, like he wasn't waiting uh, xwobacon or xwoba or barrel or anything or average exit velocity hard hit. It didn't seem like any of that was like being weighted more than I was weighting it, or whether implicitly or explicitly. But sweet spot is one that is interesting to me, so I want to test that more. And then those new attack angle measures could be different ways of getting at that same sort of sweet spot idea, potentially better ways. But
All right, so let's start with this first table. This is hitters where Oopsie was the highest out of the four we're looking at here, by again by at least 5%. I didn't want to look at where Oopsie had 1 point of advantage of these guys. These are theoretically the Oopsie guys. Theoretically, they're also your guys on your teams. We can discuss whether or not that's actually the case. I'll read out the list of names here, and then I'm curious if you sense any overall themes. It's Aaron Judge, Kyle Schwarber, Cal Raleigh. Pretty good start there. Sean Murphy, Hunter Goodman, Pete Alonso, Drake Baldwin, Manny Machado, Kyle Stowers, Byron Buxton, and Marcel Ozuna. These, again, are hitters that Oopsie was higher on their overall performance than ATC, the Bad X, and Steamer by at least 5%, and they have outperformed all of those projections. Is there a theme between these guys? I mean, there's a lot of guys who have really high bat speed and hit it pretty hard, so I guess that tracks with what you've been saying.
yeah, I think mostly my projection system is like typical to other systems. Um, that way, like the typical stats like strikeouts, walks, home runs, in proportion to like how in proportion to their variance, like how random they are. But then yeah, the bat speed definitely explains the bat speed and also barrel rate. I give serious weight to both of those, and that definitely aligns with what we're seeing here, I think. Unfortunately, I didn't get any judge because I never got a top 8 pick even this year. My picks were all like quite low. Um, and and I guess I had one auction league, but I'd never done auction before, so I didn't want to spend like $60 or however $55.
Right.
Um, but I have a Buxton. I think I have like on every team because he's quite discounted given like the injuries over the years. And I have a lot of Schwarber also. Schwarber's a guy that I was so high on him compared to other systems, including in like batting average, that it was kind of concerning to me in the beginning of the year in the preseason. But I still took him, and now I feel better about it.
Yeah, do you have any idea why that might be? I have sorted these tables, by the way, by the size of the gap between Oopsie and the rest of them. So Aaron Judge, you were the most positive on out of all these guys. You can see Oopsie projected a 199 WRC plus. He's somehow even above that. Nobody else was willing to go above 182. But Kyle Schwarber, you were 12 points higher than Steamer, who was the next best, and Schwarber's actually been 12 points better than that so far. Any idea what it is about Kyle Schwarber specifically?
Well, I think he has a really good combination of bat speed and Statcast metrics also, and he's been quite a prolific power performer over recent years. And I think in particular, it's hard if you're not including like really sticky metrics like bat speed. It's hard to get really bullish on these top names. So like even now, even with how good Judge has been, Steamer is at 167 WRC the rest of the way. The bat has caught up to me a lot. So me and the bat X are now both basically the same, 197, 198 on Judge the rest of the way. But Steamer hasn't really budged, and it's hard for Steamer to budge because it's not including like or I mean, this is my speculation, but because it's not including really sticky variables like bat speed, and I don't think it includes barrel rate either. Steamer's actually down 6 points. His WRC projection is down 6 points uh, now compared to in the preseason.
That's a little bit weird. I'm not sure why it would do that. I'm curious though about these in-season moves. For myself, as just a user of projections, I'll often look at something like ATC in the preseason because it's a more general overview of what all the projections think, and I'm often not looking for big movement in the preseason. I kind of want projection systems to, you know, cool off some of my hot takes in many cases, but in season I do want a projection system that's willing to move. And I think it's probably not a surprise that both OOPSY and the BAT-X, because they're looking at some of that data that becomes more relevant in small samples, right? Just physically, have you been able to swing the bat faster? It makes sense that those would move more quickly. And for myself, I preferred to use the BAT-X in season in previous years over other projection systems because it moves more quickly. And I would imagine I'd be looking at OOPSY the same way going forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that Oopsie weights certain guys. So if we look at Kyle Storrs, um, the Bad X has moved from 81 preseason to 10 or 98 now. So it's quite an increase. And to me, it's a little. It might be even larger than I'd prefer to see my projections moving. But I think Oopsie gives more credit to the full length, their full minor league track record, whereas the other systems, for better or worse, I'm not saying it's necessarily better. The other systems, I think, weigh AAA, AA, and especially AAA disproportionately, and they kind of have really short-term memory. They kind of forget about their earlier years more quickly. But that makes Oopsie a little more stable. So on stores, uh, Oopsie's still up like 6 points compared to the preseason, six WRC plus points. But it's not like a super aggressive 20-point gap. And right now, I'm only weighing bat speed from this year in the rest of the season projections. But that's something that I think, and similar what I do with pitching, I just weigh this year's stuff plus, uh, which it kind of makes sense to me in terms of like really sticky measures. If you think of like pitcher velocity, maybe you'd only want that for like the last three starts, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I do wonder if it's actually too aggressive because bat speed, it feels like something that guys may. Uh, I do think more helps in like in basically all cases, but it does feel like something that guys can do consciously or not consciously more than throw hard, like more than pitcher velo. Like guys can just start to swing harder, but like then they'll have a trade-off with like missing, like swinging and missing more. So I wonder if instead of just capturing 1 year bat speed, if I should capture like if I should still give some weight to the past while maintaining a very aggressive, uh, still aggressive weighting compared to other metrics.
Yeah, I wanted to dig into that a little more because, projection systems as an idea, they're built on historical data, right? The way it works is, guys who, or, the algorithm can recognize guys who looked like this in the past. We have a whole bunch. We've got centuries worth, well, a century and a half at this point worth of guys who performed at this level one season at this age. And, on average, their performance moved to this level the next season. We have 100+ years with a lot of stats. We don't have nearly the same amount of historical data when it comes to all these statcast stats. We only have what, about 8 years with some of them. With bat speed we got a year and a half. I'm kind of surprised that it works to include some of these stats when we don't have that same historical the same amount of historical info that some of the more traditional stats have. Uh, Clearly, though, it does. Was that something you would be at all worried about when you were starting to incorporate these, or did you always think all along, what, we can actually build a projection system that uses stats that have only existed for 5, 6, 7 years?
Yeah, I think you can't really sit around waiting for the perfect time to incorporate new stats uh, into your projections. I mean, people. It is like a common criticism, like you should wait to before you don't have enough sample size to incorporate bat speed or stuff, whatever. But when is it enough? Like is 2 years enough rather than 1 year? I mean, ultimately you have to make some sort of arbitrary distinction. And if you include this stuff in like regressions and testing, you can see that it helps, and you can see the chances that the impact of bat speed is just random, or that it's actually like a real signal in the among a field of noise. So I think there's no time like the present, and there's no reason to wait around. We even with 1 or 2 years of data, you can make use of it, and you can see how strong the correlations are. You can be a little bit more careful, so you don't have to include everything, especially if it seems noisy. But I think the relationship between bat speed and outcomes, even when I first wrote about bat speed, it was like 2 months into the season last year, and even then, there was enough data to make some really strong conclusions. And I was working with data from a Baseball America article on only 100 dudes, and then correlating that to only 2 months of bat speed or a month of bat speed last year. And even then, you can see that it helps. So I think it's fine to take some risks in this in this field.
I guess maybe to sum it up, for a projection system to work, it relies on big data, but actually a couple years worth of baseball players. There's a lot of baseball players out there. So you only need a couple years and you're already talking big data, basically, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there are certain measures, there are certain metrics that I didn't include because I include them I have my projection, and then let's say I have my projection, it captures all the different stuff, and then I wanted to see if I should include spray angle, like horizontal. So I threw that in there, also, in addition to like my forecast, then throw in Sprangle and see if it improves my forecast relative um, to like the original forecast. And it maybe did like a little, but it sort of had a high probability that it was just random chance. So I didn't include that. It seemed too risky to me. So I do take those things into consideration. But also, I'm not going to wait around. I don't think like I think if 1 year isn't enough, 1 year of data isn't enough for you, I don't think 2 years is going to be enough. It sounds to me like you're I don't know how to. It's just eventually you have to make that sort of arbitrary judgment call.
Yeah, and I guess the proof comes out in the results. You can test it and say, was it enough? Well, it looks like it was, or maybe it wasn't. We find out at the end of the season, and then you make more tweaks next year. We're going to move to some of the other tables here, but I just wanted to ask about Drake Baldwin. He's the only rookie on this list. And I'm curious, I had thought that a lot of this new fancy stats that goes into making Oopsie different from the others, I thought most of that is only available at the MLB level, but some of it at least goes down at least a level or two. What exactly do you have available in the minors in terms of extra stuff that you can put into Oopsie?
Um, well, my translations are like one of the unique ingredients to my projection system. So there's a lot of things there's many decisions that projectors have to make. Um, so even if mine are better or worse than the competitors this year, it wouldn't necessarily come down to stuff fuss or bat speed, because those are really just, I mean, at the end of the day, those are smaller pieces of the puzzle compared to everything that goes into it. So there are many ways I could screw up, and there are many ways that I could make good decisions. I like my translations, and as I was saying before, I give more serious weight to the full like minor league track record. I still weigh more recent performance like more heavily, but I think that's part of the deal with Baldwin, giving like full weight to his MILB track record. The other thing is I did throw in spring training bat speed into the model, and I just double checked. Baldwin did have some data there, so the logic there is basically some bat speed is better than none, given like how sticky it is in a small sample. And Baldwin he had four swings at 74 miles per hour, and then I regressed that a little bit I'm not sure how close that is. That ended up to his actual bat speed this year, but I think that helped give him a little boost compared to where he would have been without it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's check. What is his bat speed? 75.3 is what StatCast has it. So it's even
Nice.
higher than he was swinging
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
spring. So
So
basically, you had already discovered that, wait, this guy swings hard. We needed was a couple spring at bats to be more in when it's something like bat speed. That's all you need to be more in on a
yeah.
rookie.
Yeah, especially with rookies, I think even though it's just a few swings, I do think that data can help improve the projections compared to having like the alternative is you have nothing to go off of. And then another guy, Caglione, um, my projections were quite low on him going into the year because he wasn't that great in his debut, and I don't capture like college track record. But now they've moved quickly because we've got good. He's had an amazing season so far, and the bat speed data looks really good. So right now I'm a big outlier, a big positive outlier in him, like 108 WRC plus, followed by bat X at 93, followed by steamer. So I think the bat speed does help find the signal quicker there for guys like that.
Well, we're going to need Caglione to pick things up to make your projection look good because he currently has a 16 WRC plus, but plenty of time for him to turn that around. We're going to talk about a rookie that Oopsie would have told you correctly to fade in just a minute. But first, we've got a message from the NFFC. The NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot at $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. Jordan, I'm guessing that a football version of Oopsie is not waiting in the wings.
Um, at Scout the Stat Line, Tom and Ross have actually been bugging me to do football, but I haven't played fantasy football since like 2010 or something. I was pretty good in my high school league, but now I just follow baseball. I already got my hands full here.
Yeah, not much bat speed to work with over there. But let's talk about some of Oopsie's hitter fades that have been correct so far this year. I'll read off the whole list, and you can tell me if you see some themes here. Angel Martinez, Dylan Cruz, Eric Wagaman, Tommy Pham, Connor Norby, Brenton Doyle, Jackson Churio, Spencer Steer, Otto Lopez, and Marcus Simeon. I mean, I'm seeing guys from all across the career spectrum there. It seems like Oopsie was fading, the aging Marcus Simeon harder than some of the other systems, but also Oopsie was a little bit less convinced on Jackson Churio, who's not off to a great start. Oopsie was the coldest on Dylan Cruz, who's really crashed and burned so far this season. Do you notice any common?
Um, yeah, looking at these, I think Semyon was a projection that I looked at in the preseason as really worrisome. I was like, why is it so low on him? Uh, and I mean, I think he's better than he's been, and he has been hot lately. Um, but I think it was a good sort of validation on his sort of quality of giving his quality of contact measures like a good amount of weight. I think Cruz is another guy. I didn't really like my projection on him, and I still don't know if I do. And that's given it deviates so far from his like prospect pedigree and his college track record. Um, I wonder how much that would change things. I think that could explain why Zips was higher on him in the preseason. But at the same time, he does have a decent track record now, like a decently long track record across the minors and majors of like mediocre performance. So I am confident now, more confident that he's we have to take that seriously, and he's probably not like an all star. I mean, I think he can be solid still, but it doesn't look like he's going to live up fully to the hype. And Churia, I mean, he's I think his the long term projections I have are really good for him still. Um, and he's still, even now, like the oopsie projections, the power and speed is there. It's more just like the rate stats are kind of, they're lagging. Uh, but yeah, Churio is a guy that's not really concerning to me, I think, in the long term.
Cheerio also has 12 homers and 13 steals. He's showing why he was such an interesting fantasy player, that he can, be pretty disappointing in many ways at the plate. I think we expected more than about a league average batting line from him, and yet he's still not really hurting your fantasy team. So that, I
Exactly.
think,
Yeah.
partially explains why he was such an early pick. Should we move on, though, to some of Oopsie's misses on the hitter side? I don't want to just talk you up all show. We got to look at the negatives as well. And there's an interesting thing I noticed here. There are far more hitters on the left side of this page. This is hitters that Oopsie liked that haven't worked out than there are on the right side, which is hitters that Oopsie disliked that have worked out. I don't know what to make of that. Can you think of any reason why Oopsie would, have more in the former category than the second?
Um, it's not obvious to me either. I think if you look at the average WRCs across the systems, they should technically be at 100, but I think for whatever sort of sample size or selection bias, Steamer and Oopsie, I think if you weight them by like depth charts projected plate appearances, we're at like 105. So I'm happy that I'm not like higher than Steamer there, because some people think Oopsie looks hot, like too hot on guys because of those top end projections. But overall, it's similar to Steamer. But the bat X is lower. Uh, the bat X is more aligned like a hundred. Uh, it has like league average closer to 100 or maybe 102 or something. So that those differences, and it's relevant for the pitchers too, because the bat X assumes like a much higher league average ERA than the other systems. But besides that, I don't know. I don't know what would explain that. But I think a lot of these guys. So Luis Robert is a dude that I've written about a little bit his start, but I think overall his numbers, his BAPIP is really down, but his bat speed is similar to in the past. His um, his barrel rate is very similar. His strikeouts, the relationship between his walks and strikeouts, like the ratio or the like walk minus strikeouts, I like to use for hitters also in the same way that you would use for pitchers. They're all similar. It's just not showing up in the results because mostly because of the BAPIP, I think, and it's kind of like a poor man's an impoverished Churio type of thing, because he has been like easier to stomach given the steals have been crazy. Um, but the playing time is concerning. Like he's getting more rest now, even on one of the worst teams in the league, because of how bad he's been. So I would like to see him pick it up. I find myself visiting his Fangraphs page, and each time I Google him, it says you visit this page often. And then I'm like, is this still true? Is his barrel rate still pretty much aligned with his career norms? Is his strikeouts and walks still like aligned? But so far it has been. And a lot of these guys, I think, um, I would expect positive regression. I guess all the systems expect positive regression to an extent, but a good amount of them, it doesn't matter. Like Morel, it doesn't even matter anymore. Even if he regresses positively, given the playing time outlook, he's no longer kind of as exciting as he was before. It's harder to imagine a scenario where he's playing enough. He's a guy I drafted a lot, like late, but it's and I did cite like playing time concerns when I did that. But at this point, it's hard to imagine him getting a big enough role where where he's gonna like be a guy you want on a roster unless he gets traded, probably.
Yeah, I'll read off this full list of the hitters Oopsie liked that so far haven't worked out. Robert, who you mentioned, is at the top of it. Then Alexander Canario, Christopher Morel, Nathaniel Lowe, Willie Adames, Christian Campbell, Drew Waters, Julio Rodriguez, Carlos Correa, Ryan Mountcastle, Tristan Casas, Jesus Sanchez, Jordan Walker, Henry Davis, Jake Berger, and Salvador Perez. I think of Morel and Jordan Walker as kind of similar, two guys who really are near the absolute top end of the bat speed leaderboards. And when they do connect, they're near the top end of how hard they hit it as well. And they've really struggled in similar ways. Would you expect Jordan Walker to bounce back? Are you still the high man on him like Oopsie is? Or do you think that maybe there's a category of players where Oopsie's going to like them next year and we should probably remember these two and maybe not like them ourselves?
I think if I was confident enough that there was like a type of player that um, Oopsie was like biased in favor of, I would have to do something about it. So
Right.
so I can't go that far. But Walker's projections in like a redraft format are not that good. Like they're not good enough to guarantee playing time. I think now I have him at 110 WRC plus, which is enough. That's like well above the other systems, but it's still low enough that you can't assume that the playing time is going to be there. Um, I think among these dudes, the ones that are the most worrisome are the guys that also have bad like ex-wobas. Because if I'm missing on a dude like Salvador Perez, but I think his ex-wobas are quite good and aligned with his sort of career norms, I could care less about that. And oftentimes, uh, in those situations, the other projection systems might move even more towards me despite the surface level results, because the other projections are very smart also, and or they're very smart, and they are not weighting the surface level results necessarily. They're weighting the underlying stuff. So I think Jesus Sanchez, I like a lot what I'm seeing there. I don't like that he doesn't play versus lefties, and Salvador Perez too, and Luis Robert also to some extent. And then the other names, uh, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of worrisome names. I think J Rod should be okay. The ballpark sort of like anti-cores is it does limit his like um well I mean, he should still be very fantasy friendly there, but it does cap his upside, maybe make it hard for him to get to ever like get to the front end of the first round. But I think he could still we could still be looking at him as like a second round or late first round dude next year also.
I want to ask you about Christian Campbell. I was shocked to see that Oopsie put a 123 on his WRC plus, although all the projection systems were quite high, or most of them. The Bad X wasn't quite as convinced, but you saw Steamer as high as 116 there. So, what is it about Christian Campbell that Oopsie loved so much? Is it going to be minor league bat speed and hard hit data again? And do you still have some confidence despite a pretty underwhelming first couple months?
I think with Campbell, yeah. So I think I would be very in his case. He had such a good 2024, where he like skyrocketed through the minors that I was even without bat speed, I was pretty close to Steamer there. And he's a dude that was getting a lot of love as the number one prospect in baseball across like publications, probably including James here at Rotowire. Although I can't remember the specifics. So that one feels okay to me, and then the bat speed bumped him over Steamer. I think I think in a larger sample, a lot of these guys aren't too worrisome. The most annoying ones are the ones that, for me, they have like really terrible strikeout rates and walk rates. Like I guess like Walker, and Noel's not here. He didn't meet your PA minimum, but he would
Right.
fit here also. I think Canario also is like that, and Keston Hira has a solid oopsie. He also has solid projections by the other systems. He hasn't walked since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Uh, so that's a bit concerning also.
Yeah. Should we move on real quick to some of those dislikes? There's only four of them that Oopsie disliked compared to the other projection systems that have had good seasons. Victor Scott, Jackson Merrill, Nathan Lucas, and Dane Myers. Those latter two probably weren't on many people's preseason draft radar. Jackson Merrill has dealt with injuries, but when he's been playing this year, he's been looking quite good. Uh, what are your thoughts on him? Why do you think Oopsie liked him a little bit less than the others?
That's more to do with his minor league track record. So Merrill was a really exceptional case last year, where um, he wasn't like a lead in the minors or anything. There was nothing to convince projection systems to be super bullish on him. But then he was awesome in the majors. So it's still kind of like a delayed effect catching up from that. And the fact that I'm giving more weight to still to his minor league track record than the other systems. So I'm a little bit down on him compared to them. And he's a kind of confounding Oopsie in that way. But his long term projection is really good for Oopsie also. like his peak projection is really good. I do think that his fantasy friendliness leaves something to be desired. He's a very good real life dude, but he doesn't run a ton or hit a ton of homers. And the line is a bit BABIP fueled. So I think there's probably some regression coming there. I don't worry too much about Luke Myers or Scott. Um, I feel like those guys
Yeah.
are also regression candidates. Yeah.
All right, we'll move to the pitchers in just a sec. There was a question here if we discuss Nick Kurtz. He actually, I don't see a preseason steamer projection for him on Fangraphs, so he didn't make the filters that I use to put things together. But Oopsie was the highest among the publicly available projections that I can find on Nick Kurtz. And Oopsie has jumped from 110 to 120 already this season, remaining the highest of all the projection systems. I think this fits with what we talked about earlier. I mean, you'd expect Oopsie to be high on a guy who maybe has some questionable strikeout issues, but also swings and hits really hard.
Yeah. I think that explains the Kurtz projection, and also the fact that he moved through the minors last year across a couple different levels. It wasn't just upper minors, and Oopsie gave weight to all of that. So guys like, if you look at preseason, guys like Cam Smith and Kurtz, um, Oopsie was much higher than them than Steamer, and at some point Steamer took those projections down. I think because Steamer, if the guy hasn't played in Double A or Triple A, the projections that Steamer shows on Fangraphs are like super low. Like it could be like 50 WRC or something like that. And then once they adjust their priors, uh, once they adjust their priors to like reflect that no, this guy's actually going to play in the majors this year, then the projection jumps like a it can jump like 50 points or something. So something weird is going on there with like the sort of assumption of of the chances that they make the majors in a given season. Um, yeah,
Was
but I
there
feel good.
college data included for you or for anyone else for Kurtz or no?
Not for me. I don't know about for Steamer. I don't think so.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think Steamer, but Zips does college data. At least
Ah,
he Dan says he does it when necessary. So he may
okay.
only do it when guys have a smaller track record. But I think like Kurtz would make sense. He only had like what 100 plate appearances last year or something.
Oh, it was less than that. It was only 50. He had
Hmm.
12 total minor league games last year. So a good win for Oopsie being the highest on him already, it looks like. But let's end the show with some pitchers. I've got, again, a similar pair of charts here. These are Oopsie's hits on the pitcher side, starting with the pitchers Oopsie liked. And again, we have some unbalance here. There's far more pitchers Oopsie liked correctly than pitchers Oopsie disliked correctly. Although when we're doing this by ERA, that could just be because different projection systems are assuming a different overall league ERA. And if that moves from year to year, that might make one projection system look better than the others, even though if we're really trying to compare within players, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. So I think Steamer, Oopsie average ERA might be 3.98 versus like 4.03 for Steamer, something like that. So it's a little lower. It can explain it a little bit, but I think all these gaps you chose are large enough to be bigger than that. I think the bat is I don't know exactly the league average ERA, but I think it's much higher. So when I want to compare the bat to Steamer and Oopsie and the other systems, I'll often look at WAR on Fangraphs because it sort of WAR sort of corrects for that, and then often those those are figures are a lot closer than the ERA figures. So yeah, that's
I
a good
guess
note,
like
I think.
a park adjusted ERA, ERA plus, but I don't actually, it doesn't seem like the projection systems tend to project that specifically.
Yeah, I think as far as I know, there's not an easy way to compare it, and I do think it's an issue with the Fantasy Pros article. It should the Fantasy Pros like analyzing the projections article. It should really normalize ERA, or it should normalize
Right.
all the systems to the same league environment first, and then it would make it more useful, I think, because we shouldn't be judging the systems based on what their assumed league average ERA is. That could be a separate exercise if we want to guess like what we think the Major League Baseball is plotting. But we really want to judge how systems do, assuming the same like environment, the same
Right.
league
Yeah.
average ERA.
Makes sense to me. So let's read off that list of Oopsie's correct likes so far this season. AJ Smith-Shawver, well, too bad. That won't help you going forward this year. Jack Leiter, Paul Skeens, Kodai Senga, Davis Martin, Logan Gilbert, Hunter Green, Ryan Pepio, Randy Vasquez, Clark Schmidt, Drew Rasmussen, Luis Castillo, Jackson Job, and Tarek Skubal. One thing I want to point out here, Skeens and Skubal are on this list. Aaron Judge was on the hitter hits list. Is there something about Oopsie being a little bit more willing to project extreme numbers for extreme players? Like Paul Skeens, you had a 2.55 ERA on him. The lowest other ERA that I see for him was 2.78 from ATC, when he's been way better than what all of the projections said. But Oopsie was an outlier in being willing to say, no, this guy's ridiculously good. We're actually going to project a 2.55 ERA here. Is there anything? Is that a feature of Oopsie, or is that just a random fact?
No, I think if in my intro article, I sort of I pointed that out or hypothesized that Oopsie's more willing to go out, put its neck out on certain guys because it includes these really reliable metrics in small samples. So that'd be the bat speed measure for hitters, and then Stuff Plus for pitchers. Because I think Stuff Plus really doesn't move the projections by more than like plus or minus 0.3 runs at the extremes, maybe a little more for relievers. But generally it's less than that. So it's mostly traditional metrics that are feeding into the projections. But the Stuff Plus does help like go that extra mile at the end for Oopsie to be more bullish on like Skubal and Skeens. And it's nice to see that with it's definitely nice to see that with Judge and Skeens and Skubal that they have done right by Oopsie in that way. But then if you look at guys like Senga, so the projection systems don't really care about the ERA so far. So it wouldn't necessarily be true that because Senga's been this good, and I have him on my Champions League team, like I'm happy that he's been good. It doesn't mean that Oopsie likes him even more now. I think Oopsie likes him less now, and Steamer likes him less now than in the preseason because his peripherals haven't been kind of as good as expected. They'll probably, I think, it expects some positive regression in the peripherals. And then on the next, when you show the guys that that Oopsie didn't do so well with, so Dylan Cease, it's kind of the opposite case. His peripherals have been really good. The results haven't been there. He's gotten blown up a bunch of times. But all the projection systems like Cease, or at least Steamer, has actually moved more. Steamer has become more bullish on Cease compared to the preseason because it likes those strikeouts and those walks, and like ground ball and like the ground ball rates and things like that, like the actual stickier metrics that projection systems care more about.
Yeah, so maybe I'm erring by doing this based off of ERA, but of course ERA is what we're looking for in the end. So you are, in a sense, trying to project ERA, even though you know that ERA doesn't project itself very well, right?
Yeah, I do. I mostly care about ERA or in terms of getting things right. And you're not erring. I think it's very hard to judge forecasts like it's hard to deduce things just by looking at like a group of overperformers or underperformers. It's tricky to judge forecasts at all, which is why I guess the best way is like compare how they do for the across the entire system, and then maybe read about them and what goes into them and what might be included or excluded to sort of infer the differences. I mean, this is a good exercise though, and this is something that I'm always doing. I'm sort of spot checking my projections to see if they're making me look dumb or smart. Sometimes dumb, sometimes smart.
Mostly smart, I think, as what we're seeing here today. Real quick before we move on to the Oopsie misses, there were only 4 pitchers where Oopsie was correctly fading by even 2%. I'm using a 5% gap for most of these, but it was just hard to find guys that Oopsie didn't like who have been even worse than that. Jacob Lopez, Michael Lorenzen, Mitchell Parker, and Eduardo Rodriguez. Not really anybody of much consequence there, but it's guys without very impressive stuff, I guess would be the theme for most of those.
Yeah, and Eduardo Rodriguez, I traded for him recently in Highlander because it's tough. I kind of averaged Steamer and Oopsie on him. I like Steamer. I consider Steamer like my top competition for pitchers, and the bat my or Bat X top competition for bats, like for the rate stats. So I do wonder his stuff plus is so is so poor that I wonder if it's a little bit too harsh. But also ultimately, I know stuff plus has helped my projections, so I don't want to dismiss it. And I even though I acquired him, I haven't actually started him. I haven't actually had the courage to start him yet.
Yeah, I don't know if I would either. But let's move on, where we've got on the side of pitchers oopsie liked that have pitched poorly. Oh, I should mention real quick. I say pitchers. We're only looking at starters here, minimum 5 game starts, just because I didn't really think looking at 2.5 months worth of reliever ERA was going to tell us really anything about anything. I'm sure you'll have some other way to analyze relievers at the end of the season. But some pitchers that oopsie liked that haven't worked out so far: Osvaldo Bido, Lyndon Roop, Bryce Miller, Taj Bradley, Will Warren, Brandon Pfaadt, Luis Ortiz, Jordan Hicks, and Dylan Cease, who you've mentioned. Are there any here where you can say, you know what, I can see why Oopsie would have overrated them. I think it's going to continue to overrate them. Or are you buying Oopsie for all these guys going forward?
I think for most of these, they're understandable. Like Bryce Miller has just regressed, Taj has just regressed, and you're going to expect regression in different dudes. But I mean, they should be a lot better than they've been. I'm a little wounded from Bradley's start yesterday too. That was really uh, horrifying to wake up to. Um, I think
Yeah, and
Cease
that's
is
probably
fine.
not included in his ERA here too either.
It's not.
I
Yeah,
pulled these a couple days ago.
it's not. Yeah, I also was like refreshing Fangraphs. Like, how bad is the ERA now? But his xFIP is like, it was closer to 4 before yesterday. It might be closer to 4.5 now after that disaster. Um, the only one I really look here, I'm like, what the hell? Osvaldo Bido, like, why? I don't know what's the deal, Oopsie. Why are you playing me like this? I think Jordan Hicks is a guy that has had really good peripherals. The other systems like Dylan Cease, we already kind of covered him, and Warren, I think, is another dude that has really good peripherals this year. So it's hard to be too upset about those. I think one thing that's really tricky uh, is like the sort of reliever the starting pitching assumption for these guys. So um, I generally just assume that they're going to have similar usage to the past, which works for most guys. It works fine for most guys, but then for dudes that have uncertain role like Hicks and Landon Roop, uh, and is it Roop? My bad. Uh,
Uh, I'll look that up while you
okay, thanks.
continue
Sorry,
your
yeah.
point.
Sorry to the listeners, but those guys, their role wasn't really known going into the year. We assume they will get a chance to start. We still don't know if they're gonna, like, Hicks looks like he'll be in relief the rest of the way. Uh, Roop looks like he'll probably survive as a starter, given they traded Harrison Hicks, but we don't know that for sure. So it's hard to decide what role is the best to project. And I kind of left it so my rule was like touch it as little as possible. Alter the role assumption as little as possible. But for guys that you know are going to have very different role, then so that's like it's only like 10 or 20 pitchers. Like Clay Holmes is the big one, then you have to do some sort of adjustment. And a rule of thumb could generally be add one run. Uh, Add one run if a reliever is being converted to a starter. Add a run, basically. So if Jordan Hicks was projected as a 3 ERA dude as a reliever, project him as a 4 as a starter. And there's a little more fancy rules of that. You can look up. There's a little more fancy versions of that. You can look up the rule of 17 from Tom Tango. But adding one is a good enough heuristic. And King is on the flip side of the coin. The reason Oopsie is higher is because I still penalized him a little bit for having a shorter track record as a starter. So I didn't add one because had uh, he had a mixed track record as a starter and reliever, but his ERA was inflated. His Oopsie ERA projection was inflated because of that relief performance, and that's something that was really tricky, and I went back and forth on. Um, but I did end up getting closer to the other systems in that way, and I did kind of look to them for guidance there, like what should I do about King? Because I didn't want to be like a huge outlier if possible, for a reason like this.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that's tough, whether you're doing a projection or just trying to eyeball it and guess how well a guy's doing when they have had time as both a starter and a reliever. It's really hard to figure out. All right, so when he moves back to the bullpen or back to the rotation, how much of the gains that he made in the bullpen are going to continue? And I would imagine we don't actually have that large of a sample for guys who have done both of that, and it probably varies quite a bit from player to player.
Yeah, I mean, when in doubt, you gotta just trust Tango. I think the rule 17 is like the strikeouts decrease by 17%, not 17 percentage points, but like 17%
Right.
uh, when you move to starting role, and the homers and BABIP increase by 17%, and walks are not changed. And if you do that, it comes out to like around 1 run impact on ERA, and that's one. I think that's in the book, like the Tango's book. Uh, One of his like sort of legendary seminal studies. So I don't. I'm happy to skip doing those things on my own in many cases and trust. When in doubt, trust Tango.
Yeah, the book, which is often sitting right behind me when I'm at home recording these, not today. Apologies to anybody who sat through the slightly shaky Wi Fi, but I think we got through the show today on my guest Wi-Fi here at my parents' house. That is going to do it for all our lists of players here. Oh, I should mention the other two alongside Michael King, Hunter Dobbins and Eric Fetty were the other two players that Oopsie disliked but have worked out so far, but I'm not sure. There's a whole lot to say about either of those guys. But that's going to do it. Thank you very much for your time, Jordan. Any overall thoughts on these lists here, having looked at it in this format? Are you feeling good about Oopsie through 2.5 months after looking at it like this?
I think there's always more to do. I feel like it's pretty good in terms of it should be competitive. Um, but mostly I just feel annoyed at Taj Bradley for yesterday. That's the dominant emotion.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm sure we all have one or two pitchers who we are not very pleased with at the moment. But thank you very much for your time, Jordan. Enjoy the midnight sun in Helsinki, or was it Espoo? Is that where that's where your Twitter says you are right now?
Yeah,
Suburban
Espo, but
Helsinki?
yeah, it's
Espoo.
right,
All right.
it's right, yeah, it's very close to Helsinki though. Thank you.
I got
Yes,
to work on
it's
my.
pretty
I
great.
was going to say I got to work on my Finnish pronunciations, but not bad.
It's coming along, I
Uh,
think, compared to last
yeah,
time around. You're basically fluent now. You're ready to move here.
I'll get on Duolingo and we'll do the whole show in Finnish next year. But
Perfect.
thank you very much for your time. Remind people where they can find your work.
So I'm doing written content at Fangraphs. My next article is going to be. I'm kind of waiting for 50% mark of the season, and then I want to publish top hitting prospects and top pitching prospects. And then you can follow me on Twitter for updates in other ways. I've been checking in on Oopsie monthly or so. Jordan Bloom, and then you can find the peak projections at Prospects Live and Scout the Stat Line. I think
All
that
right.
covers it.
Thank you very much for your time, Jordan. Thank you to everybody who hung out in the chat. Thank you to our sponsor, the NFFC. I'll remind you, you can get 15% off any RotoWire subscription with the code YouTube15. And the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast will continue tomorrow with Todd and Clay doing two start pitchers.